Hi everyone, Heather here with astrologywithheather.com, and I am back with another special video. And in this video, we're going to be covering a topic that you guys have requested for me to discuss and give you a tutorial on for quite some time, and that is empty houses in astrology and how to interpret them. And this video is actually going to be a lecture that I recorded as part of my foundational astrology video course. And so, if you want to learn more about how to interpret astrology, interpret charts, how to use astrology in your own life or to help your friends and family, or even to go on eventually to use this as a foundation to study even further and become a professional astrologer, this is a really great course for that. I've been working on this course for well over a year before it's been released in real time, working, doing the small group live version of this course and just refining the materials and really figuring out how I want to structure this. So this has been a long time coming, you guys. And so I'm really happy with this course. I'm really excited about it. And there are actually 3 different versions of this course that are going to be available now. The first version is the foundational astrology, just the basics, where we go over the signs, planets, and houses. And there are some additional bonus materials there so you can get a really good foundation to grow from and learn from to help you to understand astrology better. The second version is the foundational astrology going deeper course, which is the full video course that goes through the signs, planets, houses, the planetary aspects, and even goes into a bonus lecture on planetary transits to give you an introduction into how to make predictions based on timing of transits and things like that. And so that version of the course is also available down in the description below. That's a little bit more in depth. There's a lot more information in there for those who want to really utilize astrology to learn how to interpret charts, to utilize it in their own lives, and to create a foundation for further study, or maybe even going on to do this professionally and learn more later on. And then I have my Foundational Astrology Going Pro, which is the small group course that I've been doing for over a year now, that I've been refining and really working on. This version includes all of the video course and also a live interactive portion. And this one is going to be available only twice per year. You can get on the wait list. And if you take the Going Deeper course and eventually get accepted into the small group course, you'll be given a coupon code, so that way you won't be paying for all of those lectures twice. And so you can find all of the information and a comparison of those 3 course options down in the description of this video below. So anyway, without further ado, what you're about to be watching here is a bonus lecture, a short bonus lecture that is included with both of these courses. I decided to release this as a free video to you guys because you've been requesting it, and also just as a little preview of some of the content that we're going to be covering in the course. There's a lot of information that we're going to be going over, including the houses, house rulerships for the Going Deeper course, the angles in the chart and how to utilize those for interpretation, and all sorts of other topics that are related to the empty house lecture that you're about to be seeing. And so anyway, without further ado, here is the lecture, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much. Hi everyone, Heather here, and welcome to your bonus lecture on empty houses in astrology. And so for this video, we're going to be talking about how to interpret areas of the chart where there are no planets, houses in the chart where there are no planets. And if you have noticed, in the title of this video, I put the word empty in quotations because your houses are never empty. There's always a lot of stuff going on there, even when there are no planets involved. And so that's what we're going to discuss in this video. This is a really important topic when you're first learning astrology, and it's one of the things I get asked about the most from my students in my live courses, and even my subscribers on my YouTube channel. That was one of the most requested tutorials on my channel that I haven't done yet, is about this topic of empty houses and, what it means to have houses that are empty. And so, you can first off look at that idea of having different segments of the chart filled with planets indicates that, those areas of life are going to be more active. And of course, that can be the case, or that could be more of a predominant theme or focus in your life, which we talked about earlier on in this series. But the empty houses still have meaning. Just because you don't have any planets in your 11th house of friendship doesn't mean you won't have any friends or anything going on there. And anyone who has an empty 11th house, unless there's, some really weird energy going on with the ruler of the 11th house, which we'll get into in a second, will tell you that they do have friendships usually. So it's not that the area doesn't matter. It's not that you don't have anything going on in that area. There's a lot that you can interpret without looking at planets in a house. And so, without further ado, let's jump into this. And so for the purpose of this lecture, I am going to use one chart example, but we will be going over this in the putting it all together segment of this section. So you'll get some additional examples of how this works. But in general, so the way that I like to interpret each house in this way, and for the purpose of this specific lecture, would be using whole sign houses, because as I've mentioned before, whole sign houses tend to translate more literally to what's happening in somebody's life on a physical level in a tangible, measurable way. And so it also makes it easier because each sign dominates each house, so you don't have to worry about what's going on with different interceptions and this and that, and multiple signs in each house. It's pretty straightforward. So when you're first learning, this is an easier way to look at things like house rulerships and empty houses, which is what we're going to begin to discuss in this lecture. And so, it's pretty straightforward looking at empty houses. Instead of looking at the planets to tell you what's going on in that house, you look at the sign that rules the house, and that sign is going to give you a ton of information about what's going on there in and of itself, without even getting even deeper into looking at the planet that rules that house, which is something that we'll talk about in depth for those who are in the going deeper version of this video course. Looking at the sign that rules the house is going to give you the information that you're seeking. It's going to describe the energy of that area of life for that person, and it can do so very effectively, and there's plenty going on regardless of whether or not there's planets in that house. And so an example of this would be, if somebody has an empty 11th house, like I mentioned before, but their 11th house is ruled by Cancer. So they have Cancer in their 11th house. What does Cancer represent as a zodiac sign? It represents this sense of safety, security, emotional support, nurturing, family, right? These are all Cancerian themes. And so what types of friendships would this person draw into their life? Very literally, they would draw in friends that feel like family. Their friendships would be very supportive, very nurturing, and they would feel like these relationships with their friends were almost as if these people were their family, like if they were blood relatives to them, and they might even be closer to their friends than they are their own family. When they have Cancer ruling the 11th house, they seek out friendships that feel safe, nurturing, supportive, right? They seek out these types of relationships that feel really familiar and really comfortable, and they want to be able to trust somebody with their emotions and to have an emotional support system within their social circle. On the opposite end, as a friend, they might express that Cancerian energy. So they might provide nurturing and support, and they might be sort of a mothering, maternal figure or a nurturing, caring figure within their social circle. So they're the ones that are always making sure that their friends are okay and taken care of, and that they feel all right. And if they need a shoulder to cry on, they can come to you, that type of thing. And so that's the energy of Cancer as the ruler of the 11th house. So just right there, you've gotten a lot of information without any planets being involved, right? And so pretty straightforward, pretty easy. I'll give you another example of this. And so let's think about the 5th house of play and hobbies and interests and things that you love to do and your passions and children even. And so somebody who has no planets in the 5th house doesn't mean they're no fun. It doesn't mean they don't have romance. It doesn't mean they don't do anything that they enjoy. They don't have hobbies. They don't have passions. If that were the case, a lot of people would be very boring. So what do we look to if the fifth house is empty? We look at the planet that rules the fifth house. And so let's say somebody has Pisces ruling the fifth house of play and pleasure and fun and joy and hobbies and interests and children and all these wonderful things. What does Pisces rule? Creativity, mysticism, spirituality, right? It's that transcendent energy. It's compassion, it's that romanticism, it's imagination. And so if you remember back to the lecture on the 12 houses, the fifth house represents what you like to do for play when you're a child. And so children who have Pisces on the cusp of the fifth house are going to be very imaginative. They're going to want to use their imaginations. They're going to want to engage in creative forms of play. They might paint, they might dance, they might do things that are more mystical and intuitive and be leaning toward those types of themes when it comes to their play as well. They might be interested in magic. They might engage in fantasy when they're looking for enjoyment. And into adulthood, that still holds true. People who have Pisces as the ruler of the fifth house with no planets in there, they're going to, in their free time, the things that they love to do involve spiritual exploration. They involve magic and wonder and fantasy and illusion. Sometimes the things that they like to do for play are mind-altering and escapist to a certain extent, because that's also an energy of Pisces, right? So maybe to enjoy and indulge and have fun, they like to kick back with a glass of wine, or they, like to use psychedelics or something like that from time to time, which can be okay, in moderation. And depending on other aspects of the person's chart, that might be actually a really positive thing for them. Something that they might enjoy as a hobby is diving into spirituality, doing things like meditation, yoga, doing things like, spiritual studies, spiritual exploration. They might like creative forms of hobbies and play. They might like to dance, they might like to paint, they might like to take photographs, right? Or create films or videos, because that's a Pisces ruled thing. They might be into medicines and things like that. Maybe they study herbalism, or they study, different forms of things like that are ruled by Pisces as well. Maybe they like water. Maybe they like to go to the ocean and take a swim. So all of these things can be the case. So there's a lot of information there that's coming just from that area of Pisces being in the fifth house. And so I'm going to give you guys one final example of this and how this works. And this is another Pisces example, so it'll be kind of easy to put the pieces together based on what I just said about Pisces in the fifth house, which fifth house also has an association with romance, by the way. So somebody might engage in romantic relationships, especially short-lived relationships that are not going to be long-term, that are with people who are floaty and creative and maybe a little bit more, out in space, out in the ethers, or people who are very spiritual. And so going back to my chart example here, so this is the whole sign house chart of Patrick Swayze, who is a person that I've been using as an example throughout this series, because I've worked with this chart a lot in previous webinars, and I just watched a couple of weeks before starting recording some of these lectures. I watched the documentary I Am Swayze, which is about Patrick Swayze's life, and so I have him fresh in my mind. I know all sorts of new things about his personal life that we couldn't have known before that. And so it's an easy chart example to use, and it's helpful if you're playing with celebrity charts to use examples from people who, from celebrities where they have maybe like a biography or an autobiography or documentaries about them, where you can go a little bit deeper beyond just their public persona, because it's very helpful in understanding the chart and understanding the person and how that relates. Because a lot of times with these public figures, we're seeing one side of them on the outside, but there's other stuff going on that we might not be aware of, even in like the tabloids and things like that. And so for Patrick Swayze, moving on, for Patrick Swayze, you can see here in this chart example that his seventh house, which is the house of marriage, relationships, long-term committed partnerships, it's completely empty. but it's ruled by Pisces. And so if you were to say that there's no action going on in his 7th house, so, there's not going to be a lot of romance, there's not going to be a lot of love, he might not get married, that would be completely false and completely inaccurate, knowing Patrick Swayze's biography and what happened in his life. He actually had a very long and for the most part happy marriage with his wife. And so, that shows up in a couple of different ways. That's where we get into some other interpretive principles that we'll be talking about in the house rulership lecture. But in just looking at the 7th house being in the sign of Pisces, we can tell a lot about his relationship with his wife and who his wife even was. And so what does Pisces rule? Creativity, right? It's film, photography, these types of things as well. And so his wife was a dancer. She was very creative. She worked a little bit more behind the scenes once they got married and once Patrick Swayze's acting career took off. But you would be able to see that they would have a very deep spiritual bond, a very intimate connection where what he craves in his relationship is merging his soul with the soul of another person, having that really deep, compassionate connection with somebody else, sharing a similar spiritual belief system or having a deep spiritual connection. With that 7th house energy being in the sign of Pisces, there's a tendency for people who have this placement to see people, especially people they're really close with, and especially their long-term relationships and marriage partnerships, through this lens of rose-colored glasses, because he's so deeply compassionate and deeply loving, and he cares so much for his partners. He's a little bit of a softie there, so he sees his wife in this idealized view, or he would see his wife, once when he was alive, in this sort of idealistic light that might not actually be, in correlation with what's really going on sometimes. So he might not see her realistically or in a way that's very grounded at certain points in time. He'd see her more idealistically. He'd see her through this beautiful lens of love and compassion, and he'd see her for her greatest qualities. And so that's part of that energy of having Pisces in the 7th house. But even just in terms of the way that who his wife was, right? It describes her. She was creative. She was a dancer, those types of things. And so you can see how that correlates in real time in Patrick Swayze's chart. So hopefully you found that example a little bit helpful. All right, so thank you guys so much for watching this little short lecture here. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.